Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the next part of report writing. This time we'll be looking at what things you'll need to first consider before actually writing your report. Now, planning a report is serious business because if not, you may end up with hardly any substantial material, or even worse, you may end up with too much and write a really unnecessarily long report, which nobody wants. So there are some steps that you need to consider when planning your report. Step 1 involves defining the problem and the purpose of the report. So this is when you actually look at the question that you're given by your tutor or lecturer and really narrow down what the problem actually means and how you can go about finding the solutions to it. Step 2, define the audience. Now this refers to who you're actually writing for. Step 3, determine the ideas that you would like to include. Step 4, collect the information that you will need in addressing the issue or finding out the solutions to the problem. Step 5, sort and evaluate the information that you have collected. Step 6, organize the information. And step 7, prepare the outline of your report. So quite a few steps that you have to go through. So let's go through each of these steps. Now, the best method for ensuring you write an excellent report is to have objectives written down and agreed with whoever has requested the report. Now, the way to do this is to work through a series of questions, think about the answers, and then write an objective that summarizes your thoughts. Many people start by gathering the information and then they sit down and write, and this is where you end up with rambling, long reports that have too much information and eventually end up missing vital points. So the question you need to consider are, why is this report being written, first of all? Who is going to read the report? Who else will read it? Why do they need it? What do they already know, so you don't have to give them unnecessary information? What do they need to know about the topic? Are they familiar with it, or do they need to know basic terms and definitions? What don't they need to know? So this is when you can cut down unnecessary information. And finally, what are they going to use the information for? So the first step in defining your problem and trying to decide what should be included in your report should involve these questions. Now, step 1, define the problem and the purpose of the report. It's important to analyze the problem and define your purpose. So it's useful at this stage to ask yourself the following questions. So what will the report investigate? What is the scope of your investigation? What are the limitations of your investigation? What method will you use to conduct it? And what is the significance or importance of this particular investigation? So defining the purpose of your report is most important. Once you've determined the purpose, it will be easier to define your audience and therefore the information that you need to collect. Now, step 2 involves defining the audience. At university, it's relatively easy to define who you're writing for. It's basically your lecturer or tutor who is the marker of your work. But in the workplace, the process may require further analysis and will impact on the scope and style of your report in terms of issues such as degree of technicality. Now, given that the audience of your report at university, you will need to present a report that is obviously well-researched, shows a depth of understanding, and of course uses appropriate academic style. Now, step 3, determine the ideas to include. It's important to establish the ideas or topics you need to address, so make a list of all the potential topics or sections of the report, and from these you can draw up a preliminary outline of the headings that may be included in your report. Now, this step will greatly assist you in collecting the information you need. So this is obviously also an essential step in report planning. Now, step 4, collecting the information. After having identified the issues and topics, you need to locate the research and information needed. Now, there are two main categories of information used in report writing. It's either primary, which includes interviews with people, conversations and so on, face-to-face, and secondary, which involves published materials or reports and statistics. Now, make sure that your sources are reliable and that they're credible as well. Now, step 4, talking about sorting and evaluating the information. Once you've gathered your information, you need to review your material. And as you review, highlight the key terms and ideas that relate to the purpose of the report. Now, this highlighted material may make up the findings section of the report. Place these in a file and put any irrelevant material into a background file. Don't discard any information until the report is complete, because circumstances may change and you'll save a lot of time if you need to make any major changes or if the purpose of the report itself changes. Now, step 6, organize the information. Going back to the preliminary headings you drew up, begin to sort your information under these headings if they are still appropriate. This step is very important because you must ensure that you have a suitable structure or outline of the report. Keep the big picture in mind. For instance, how do the ideas link together? Are there any gaps in the information? What headings or issues are the most important and what subheadings might come under them? You may need to revise your headings or outline during this process and add new topics or remove redundant or irrelevant ones. Categorize your information under the headings and then plan subheadings. Having done this, ensure that your sequence of heading and subheading is logical and appropriate as well. Now, step 7, prepare the outline. There are different ways to provide a logical order of information, which you obviously would like to achieve in your report. First of all is through a chronological sequence, so in order of dates or time. Next is order of importance, so this is from most important to least important or vice versa. Next is inductive order, from general going down to more specific, or the reverse, deductive order, from the specific to the general. You may follow a problem-solving order, or you might use a scientific report structure. So the order of the information in the report is closely linked with the purpose of the report. These suggestions are merely that, generic suggestions, so it's up to you what type of order you would like to use. Now, organizing the report. There's obviously no one ideal strategy that can be used to organize the information of your report, as this will vary and be dependent upon the information you are presenting. A logical and clear organizational strategy, however, is a key ingredient to a good report, so just keep that in mind. Now, still continuing with organizing the report, but more specifically towards the numbering for headings and subheadings, you have to be sure that you include a consistent numbering system for the headings and subheadings, or to use the layout of the report's headings to indicate the sections and subsections. For example, the following heading and subheadings have been taken from the report of the university library. Now, next is an extended example of a report structure that looks at how you might arrange the hierarchy of headings and subheadings. The first order numbering identifies the main sections, as you can see in numbers 1, 2, and 3. A second order system of numbering is used for the subheadings or subsections that come under each of the main headings. As you can see, under heading of the first main section, you've got 1.1, followed by 1.2 and 1.3, and the same thing for the second heading, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, etc. And then you might have further subsections, which of course require even more subdividing into a third order system of numbering, into 1.2.1, 1.2.2, and so on. So you get the idea. Now, using headings in your report, headings should be clearly, logically, and accurately labeled, since they reveal the organization of the report and they allow the reader to quickly reference specific information as well as make the report easy to read. So the headings are very important and you should label them and organize them accordingly. So headings should be specific and descriptive, but not vague and general. Sometimes a main heading will be general, but the specificity is developed through subheadings. Given this need for being specific, headings would tend to be more like an abbreviated or shortened sentence rather than a single word. A good rule of thumb from Weaver & Weaver is that a heading should be long enough to be an inclusive label, but short enough to be immediately clear. You should also try to make headings grammatically and logically consistent. For example, if your main heading was types of schemas and your subheadings under the section were the following: schemes for scenes, for events, for stories, and then problems and their schemas, it would definitely be better to change the final subheading, problems and their schemas, to schemas for problem, just so that the consistency for all the headings is maintained. Also avoid using headings that are catchy rather than informative. For instance, the subheadings below, although they're quite catchy and cute, they detract from the serious informative intent of the following report. For example, in heading 4, Key Products and Services of the McDonald's Corporation, which is fine, is followed up with a subheading 4.1, the Big Mac, 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, and onions on a sesame seed bun, or 4.2, McFlurry, just like a snowstorm in your mouth. So other than being somewhat unprofessional in a formal report, it's also unnecessarily long and not really what is required in an academic report. Next, we are brought to referencing, which is obviously essential, particularly in academic writing. So you need to include any sources that you have consulted during your research for the report. Just a reminder, a bibliography is a list of all the reference material you consulted during the research, while a reference list is a list of all the references that you actually include in your report, listed in alphabetical order at the end. Now, each reference in the list needs to contain all of the bibliographic information from a source, and you should also check with your lecturer or tutor for any guidelines or faculty guidelines on referencing formats. And now this brings us to the final stage of editing. The final stage of process of writing a report is a significant one because thorough editing helps to identify things such as spelling mistakes, awkward or incorrect grammar, breakdowns in the logic of the report's organization or conclusion, and also allows you to see whether you've really fulfilled the requirements of the report and answered all parts of the question. So even though it's towards the end, it's something that is very important before you actually hand in your final report. So that brings us to the end of report planning. I will see you in the next series, which will also talk about report planning in part 2.